First of all, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. So just to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in the gaming industry?
Yes, certainly. So, my name is Glen Goldstein. I, for the last 2 years, have been the president of TransUnion Gaming Services, which is our subsidiary to enter gaming in the U.S. I also serve on the board of directors of the American Gaming Association and on the task force for responsible gaming. But my remit at TransUnion is actually much broader. I'm responsible for our business in the US that is neither financial services nor insurance. So I cover a wide swath of industries, um, technology, retail, e commerce, hospitality, transportation. But with the real focus on gaming, I've been spending a fair amount of time in that space recently, since it's a relatively new market in the US, at least for the online side.
So you mentioned that you've been at TransUnion for 2 years now. For those that might not know, can you tell us a little bit about the company?
Certainly. Most people who know us think of us as the credit bureau in the US, and that is certainly our history or our heritage for the last 50 years. But we're actually have become much more than that. We're today a diversified information services company. As I tell my mom when she asks me what we do, I describe us as the Amazon.com of data. So um, there are three companies, at least in the US, that are major credit bureaus: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. There are also three companies that have public databases that have identity graphs of individuals that cover more than 95% of the US. And again, of those three, TransUnion is one of them. The other two are LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters. So you can see that TransUnion is the only one that actually has both the credit side and the non-credit side, which allows us to pull together and create an identity graph of individuals that's much more robust than anyone else can, which is really important for everything from fraud to marketing, where you're trying to identify people. Uh, and not only that, I would probably be remiss if I didn't mention that we're international. We're in 33 countries today. So we have a credit bureau in the UK that was formerly known as Call Credit. We're the credit bureau in India, Brazil, and several other countries. So what was credit bureau a long time ago is now less than 50% of our business. We've become very diversified as an information services company.
So, you're kind of present all over the globe, as you mentioned, 33 different countries. So, in your opinion, what have been the driving forces that have established TransUnion as a market leader? Especially when it comes to things like KYC, fraud prevention, and responsible gambling.
Certainly. Well, in gaming in particular, we actually got into the gaming market in the UK quite early. When the regulators came in, when online gaming became popular in the UK, and really stipulated that they wanted the operators to manage responsible gaming, but didn't provide a lot of clarification as to how. TransUnion was really the company that was working with both the operators and the regulators to try and come up with a framework. So we developed the first responsible gaming models in the UK, and today we work with nine of the top 10 operators, as well as on KYC. So we've now honed our experience in that space for the last 10 years. Uh, the second thing, at least in the US, because the market really didn't exist in online gaming before PASPA, which is the sports betting regulation, was overturned a few years ago. And that's opened up a brand new market that we can enter. The responsible gaming in the US is really still very nascent. The rules aren't written yet. And so, what we're attempting to do is take our expertise and the work we've done with operators and regulators in the UK and transfer that experience to help the US so that the market hopefully is able to develop a little bit more speedily and safely for everyone involved in the US.
That kind of leads me on to my next question. So you mentioned that you kind of served the global industry for 10 years now, but how are you going to showcase that expertise to the US market in particular?
Certainly. So the foundation of what we do is really our identity graph and our ability to do fraud and KYC, which helps the operators everywhere from player onboarding to try and minimize friction and segment players so that they can gamble what they can afford to gamble. And so that definitely is an area of strength for us. But the responsible gaming models that we've built in the UK, which are really market leading across the world, is something where we're really looking to make a mark because we're really ahead of where the regulators in the market are. So I think, again, our goal is to try and help accelerate the adoption of responsible gaming in the US, which is good for the operators, good for the players, and I think will make a much smoother environment for government regulation than perhaps the experience in the UK as it developed.
In your opinion, what are the key challenges that operators are facing when it comes to creating kind of a standout better experience, and how are you kind of helping, how is TransUnion helping these operators to overcome these hurdles?
The biggest challenge for operators in such a competitive market, which the US is, as people come into the space and you have a lot of first timers, is trying to make a great player experience from the beginning of the interaction with someone. So minimizing friction at onboarding while still trying to make sure that you onboard a customer safely, set the right gambling limits, etc. And really that you know who's on the other end of the transaction, which is really where we can combine offline and online identity to create that graph, the identity graph that is much more broad, deep, and accurate than we believe anyone else can do. And that helps not just in fraud, but in the US, operators are really, I wouldn't say struggling, but they're still in the early stages of working through player segmentation and how to treat players and deliver to them the best player experience they can. And as they work on segmenting the market, that identity of the player, who they are, both online and offline history, that's key to understanding how you can best serve them. And that's really where we think TransUnion can play a critical role.
Kind of, you touched kind of on the credit and non-credit side earlier. So, how important is both credit, non-credit, and device data when it comes to supporting these operators with KYC, fraud, responsible gambling?
For KYC, responsible gaming, and fraud, the online and offline identity is critical. In many cases, it is much more important than the credit data. So understanding who a player is, who that person is on the other end of the transaction, or the history of the device on the other end of the transaction is really important for identifying fraud, money laundering, bonus abuse. And so we find that that data is particularly critical in that environment. Also, it really helps to have not just income data, although people think of income as primarily for affordability, but you can imagine two players with the same income, one of whom may be retired and not have a house payment anymore, and another one who may still have a very large house payment. And their situations are very different. So gambling behavior and betting behavior for one player may be perfectly reasonable and affordable, whereas for another player, that may signal risky behavior. And so it's really important to segment those out. And it's only with that broader view of the customer and their entire context that you're able to do that. And in that case, credit actually doesn't in any way tell the whole story. And that's where you need a much broader and richer picture.
I would say, yeah, I definitely think that you need that holistic approach when it comes to players. You say,
Agree.
age, kind of all these different demographics of players and have completely different situations.
Hmm. I would agree. And we also find that age is an important segmenter because behavior tends to differ with age as well.
Yeah.
And although that's one factor, putting all of those factors into that mix gives you the breadth, the depth, and the accuracy to really understand the context to try and make the best decision you can.
Slightly fast forward into the future. You're planning to come to SBC Summit North America. Can you give us a sneak peek into some of your plans for the event?
Certainly. So we're going to be a premium sponsor at the Player Protection Symposium, and we're going to be speaking both on the experience in the UK and how that could apply to the US market, which we think is very relevant, very important. We're also going to talk about the current uh, what we call the cost of living crisis, at least in the US, as inflation has spiked and as especially home prices and rental for property has gone way up. What does that mean for operators and for affordability in the US market? So, should be a very interesting discussion. We're really looking forward to it.